Okay, guys, here we are in my car again. This is going to be a feedback video for week 5 and a check-in video for week 6. So, the feedback that I'm giving today is based on some of the stuff that I've seen in some of the papers I've graded, but it's also going to be feedback based on what I've seen in previous terms and stuff as well. The quiz feedback obviously is going to be true to you guys because I have that real-time data in front of me. Okay, so I don't really have a whole lot to say about week 5 feedback, honestly, because you guys already did a current research reflection in week 3. I gave you feedback on that. And so you guys know at this point, you've done current research reflections in the first part of this course in 234 and possibly even for other psychology courses. So I feel like I don't need to harp on that for a really long time. You guys know, you just need to, the main thing is making sure that you're answering all parts of the prompt, all parts of the questions within the prompt. And that's true for the current research reflection. That's true for every assignment. And so also true for your research proposal. Hint, hint, the methodology section coming up. Please, please, please make sure that you are answering all the questions. When there's a prompt, the questions are not there as like a guideline. Like you can answer some of these you don't necessarily have to answer. Just answer which ones you want to answer. That's not how the prompts are. In case you were possibly confused about that, when there's a prompt or an assignment description, each question in there needs to be answered, and each part of each question needs to be answered, okay? Because otherwise I have to take off points on the rubric. Okay, and because all the questions are there for a good reason, right? They're helping you learn different concepts of the course, and so they're all there for a reason. Also, make sure that you are explaining, I said this in one of the other videos, make sure you're explaining as if you are explaining to someone who's never read the articles that you've read. That's true for current research reflection. That's true for your literature review in your introduction part of your research proposal project. Make sure that the whole time you're writing, you're thinking, this person knows nothing about this. So I've got to make sure that I explain and that I'm very specific. This also is very true for your research proposal project for your methodology section. Obviously, you're not talking about research that's already been done. You're proposing research that you want to do, that's going to be. So that's all future tense. But you still need to explain in such a way that somebody who's not in your brain can understand, right? So you might have a great plan in place for your research and have great ideas, but you have to be able to express that in a way to the reader that we are on that journey with you, that we understand where you're going. We understand what your research is going to look like and what that, design and what the participants are going to experience, what that design is, how you're going to measure the variables that combined into marriage, how you're going to measure the variables, and how you're going, all of that. Like, you need to make sure that you are very specific and that you are clear. A great way to see if someone who has no idea what you're talking about can understand it is to have someone else in your life read it. Someone who doesn't know what you're talking about, have them read it. And it's okay if they don't understand the nuances of the psychology parts of it. You just want to see if they can basically understand what you're saying as far as what your design is going to look like. And if they read it and they're like, okay, but how are the participants going to get from this point to this point? Or what, how, you said you're going to look at sleep deprivation, but how are they going to be sleep deprived? Or you said you're going to look at GPA, but where are you going to get their GPAs from? Or you said you're going to look at personality, but you don't actually say how you're going to measure their personality. Or where is this all going to take place? You said you're going to get this information from them or collect this data from them, but how, where, in some random room on a college campus, are you going to walk around and survey people in the cafeteria? What is the deal? So just things like that, like having someone else read it might help you realize that there's questions that you didn't answer, parts of the study design that you didn't think about. Oh, I need to answer how that's going to work. And so, yeah, I highly recommend having someone else read it. So I kind of skipped ahead to the research proposal advice, but we'll come back to that in a minute. But that kind of all kind of goes together as far as being specific and answering all the questions, and pretending or thinking about the fact that your reader knows nothing about what you're talking about. And you got to keep that in mind as you're writing. The discussion post for this week, or for week 5, was about the survey questions. And most of you have, won't lose very many points, or didn't lose points, because it was pretty straightforward. The only way that you may have lost points, or that you may lose points, is if you weren't specific enough in your questions. As far as the open-ended questions, obviously they're just open-ended. They can, any kind of answer is fine. But for restricted questions, they have to be restricted. There has to be only certain options. And so if you didn't give options, then that's not a restricted question. And same with the rating scale. You may have written it as a rating scale question. Like you may have said, something like, approximately how many times do you shower a week? Or something like that. That sounds like a rating scale question, but you didn't provide the scale. So you have to provide the options. Again, just like the restricted questions, you have to provide the scale. You have to say, on a scale of 0 being never, 1 being a few times a week, and 3 being every single day, or whatever. On that scale, how many times do you shower a week, or whatever the thing is. But you have to actually say what the scale is. You have to give them that option so that they are actually picking only the answers you select. That's part of the benefit of a restricted question and a rating scale question, is that it's not open, and you're not going to have answers that go across the board that are really hard to code and get data from. It's easier to get data from restricted and rating scale questions, because there's distinct number choices for each thing. And so the person's only going to, all your participants are only going to respond with a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5, or whatever your scale is. So that was part of that. And then also just making sure that you explained how that would, how it helped you like flesh out your proposal, or how it related to your proposal. Again, you don't have to use those questions in your proposal. If you're not doing a survey or not doing anything like that for your proposed design, you do not have to use those questions that you created for that. Of course you can if you want to, but you do not have to. If you're using previously established tools to measure your variables for your proposal, that is actually preferred, because it is shown to be reliable and valid. And so that is actually preferred than coming up with something yourself. So yeah, you don't have to use that. I just want to make sure that's clear again. Okay. I had to switch to another video because I didn't want to lose it, because the longer I go, sometimes it messes up the file. That is really all the feedback for that. So let's do feedback for quiz 5 really quickly. I think there was only 2 or 3 questions I really wanted to go over. You guys did really great on the week 5 quiz. So one was about, it said, this is actually a question from chapter 13, not 14. It said, when an observer switches recording from one behavior during one interval to another behavior during another interval, it is known as. And for some reason, a lot of you guys picked time sampling, and I guess because it was on the same slide, and we talked about it at the same time as event sampling, which event sampling was the correct answer. And so maybe that confused you guys. But remember, time sampling is, it is intervals, but it's where you are observing for one interval, and then the next interval you're recording. And then the next interval you're just observing, and then the next interval you're recording. And so you alternate between intervals of just simply observing and then recording. That's what the time sampling is. Event sampling, which was the answer here, is like it said, where in the intervals you're actually recording and observing at the same time every single interval. What changes between intervals is what you're looking for, like what behavior you're observing or what event you're observing. So the behavior or the event is what changes in each interval, but you're recording and observing each interval on event sampling. Okay, so, and that's what they're describing here, is recording one behavior during one interval and then a different one during another interval. So that's event sampling. Okay, let me find the other questions. Okay, here's one. All right, so it says, a researcher decides to only use participants who are between 25 and 35 years. Oh, this was the one, I went over this either last video or video before. So for those of you who were able to get it correct this time, and maybe you missed it last time, good job. You watched the video and you listened to my feedback. For those of you who got it wrong this time, you probably got it wrong last time and you didn't watch the video feedback, and so you didn't understand, or you didn't hear me explain this. So, it's talking about participants who are only 25 to 35 years of age is what they limited their experiment to, when they were comparing two treatment conditions. And it says what method is being used to control participant age. So it sounds like limiting the range in the sense that it's a range of numbers that you're limiting age to. So I get why I really despise this question. Again, I didn't create these questions. These were not created by me. So I don't really like this question at all, because I don't think it's very fair to you guys. I think it's unnecessarily complicated and tricky, but it does sound like limiting the range. Like, it makes sense. And so I get why a lot of you guys thought it was limiting the range. But again, it is the reason that's not the answer is because limiting the range is not a method for controlling extraneous variables or potential confounds. Limiting the range is something that you do to a data set after the data has been collected for like statistical analysis or other purposes. But it's after the data has been collected. It's not before the study when you're trying to figure out how to control for extraneous variables. So this is talking about before, like when they're designing their study, they decide that they're only going to use participants who are between 25 and 35 years old as a method of controlling for the extraneous variable of age, because for whatever reason, age is a possible confounding variable in their study. And so they're worried it's going to affect, if they use two people who are older than 35 or people who are younger than 25, they're worried that's going to affect their dependent variable, whatever it is. And they don't want that. They only want, remember, you only want the independent variable to be affecting the dependent variable. You don't want anything else. And so they're trying to control for age that way. And so that's called a holding constant. When you take a variable and you limit it in some way, you're holding it constant. You're holding age constant between 25 and 35. You're only using those, participants. You're only using that part of a variable, if that makes sense, because you're only using that part of age, so that it does not adversely affect your dependent variable or, your data. So again, I apologize. I don't like that question. But hopefully, I'm not sure if it appears, I can't remember if it appears again. But if it does appear again on another quiz or on your final, please, I hope that you're watching this video right now so that you don't miss that again. So that's the benefit of watching these videos. All right. So, I think this might be the last one, but I'll check in just a second. But, it's talking about which research strategies attempt to address the same question about the relationship between variables. So basically, this is trying to make sure that you understand the difference and similarities between the different types of research strategies: descriptive, correlational, experimental, non-experimental, quasi-experimental. And so this was kind of all over the place as far as answers go, except I am proud of you guys. Nobody picked descriptive and correlational. So you realized that you acknowledged that those are two separate, very different questions. First of all, it says a question about relationship between variables, and descriptive is not even about a relationship. It's just describing variables. So I applaud you guys for not picking that one. Again, descriptive is just describing variables. or describing a variable or variables. This is what it looks like. That's it. They're not looking for a relationship. Correlational is saying how, are these variables related in some way or not? That's it. So we are looking for a relationship, but those are very different questions. Correlational and experimental, remember, are not answering the same question, because correlational is just saying, is there a relationship? Experimental is saying, does one cause the other? Does one variable cause an effect in the other variable? So those are very different questions. Yes, they're both looking at relationships, but experimental is way more specific. Correlational just wants to know if they're related. Experimental wants to know how they're related. Okay, so it's a different question. And then experimental, quasi-experimental, and non-experimental, again, those are, yes, they're all looking at relationships. But again, experimental is the only one that is really able to look at that cause and effect relationship, because there's true manipulation, there's random assignment, all of those, boxes are checked. And so they can actually say this variable causes an effect in this one or not. They're testing for that. Quasi-experimental and non-experimental would like, I'm sure people who are doing that kind of research would like to know if there's cause and effect. But if you're doing that kind of research, you're not answering that kind of question. Because you can't with that kind of design. You can't say one causes the other. All you can say is that there's a relationship. Quasi-experimental, because it has those some elements of experimental, that's kind of a gray area we've talked about before. And so, but it is not truly correlational or experimental. It's kind of in between. Okay. So the only possible answer here is non-experimental and correlational, because yes, they are different types of research. I'm sorry, I just bumped my screen or my computer. Yes, they are different types of research, but they are essentially answering the same question, which is there a relationship between these two variables or not? They're not looking for how are they related, is there cause and effect or any of that. They're just saying, is there a relationship here or not? Okay. And so, that's why it's correlational and non-experimental, because even though they are different designs and they are used with different variables and different setups, they are essentially answering the same kind of question. So I hope that helps clarify that. Let me see if that was it. Yes, it was. So you guys did awesome. And then let's look at, I'm sorry, I'm pulling up my content folder really quickly. So let's move into week 6. Okay, so we're going to move into week 6 now. Again, I had to start a third video, so that I don't lose it. So we have a discussion post again. Hopefully you've already done that. But remember, by Sunday you have to interact with 2 classmates. This was on that article about the research article about the good behavior game. I will say the thing that students lose points on the most on this assignment is that they talk more about the good behavior game than the research design. So I'm going to say that again. Describing how they implemented the good behavior game can be part of your description of the research, where you're like summarizing the research. But when the other questions in the prompt and the main point of analyzing this article is not about the good behavior game. It's about the research design. It's about the design choices that they made in their research and how they collected data. Okay. So keep that in mind when you're reading through the article, and when you're, if you already sent, like I said, you probably hopefully already have posted your post. But if I said that and you're thinking, oh, I don't know if I did that, go back and add something else to your post. Add a comment if it won't let you edit your post, because I will count that for sure. And so, yeah, absolutely go back and make changes if you need to, because that's the way that most students lose points, is they don't realize that these questions are not, the good behavior game is a cool thing, but that's not the point of this article as far as like what we're doing. This is a research design course, right? So we're more interested in how they implemented the design of their research, not the good behavior game. Okay. And then, of course, you have your week 6 quiz. And then the big thing this week is your methodology section for your research proposal project. I already kind of touched on making sure that you are being as specific as possible, making sure that you are explaining to somebody, remember that they don't have a clue what you're talking about. So that is, I'm standing by that advice. But within each section, make sure that you're answering each of the questions. So, there's a design section, there's a sampling and sampling method section, there's a measurement section. Make sure you're answering all the questions. There's 3 or 4 questions in each section, and there's questions within those questions. So make sure that you're answering all parts of that. Like I said, it's not a guideline or optional. You need to actually answer each of those questions. And honestly, I would say even go above and beyond. This is just the minimum of what you should be saying. There's probably things that aren't even on here that you need to say, as far as thoroughly explaining what you're wanting to do in your research. Okay. So for the design, are you going to do an experimental study or non-experimental study? Meaning, are you going to have true manipulation of an independent variable and true random assignment of participants to groups? Or are the groups going to already exist, like male and female, or, certain age groups or whatever? Are they going to come into the study already being in groups? Then if that's true, then it cannot be truly experimental. It can be non-experimental or quasi-experimental. If you are, excuse me, I feel like I'm going to burp, but it won't come. If you are truly manipulating an independent variable and you are randomly assigning, then it can be experimental, but you have to explain that. So when it says, what is your rationale? What that means is, why can it not be experimental? Or why did you choose to do non-experimental over experimental? Explain, justify your choice. And then, same thing with what specific design are you going to use? What is this research going to look like? How are you structuring it? Are there going to be, groups, that you're comparing? Or are you just is it just correlational research where you're just looking at, how 2 variables move up and down together or, not together? Or like I said, is there going to be groups? Is there some sort of treatment? And so there's going to be like a control group, that kind of thing. And then the specific research methods that you're going to use within that design. So are you going to have surveys? Are you going to have interviews? And that kind of goes into your measurements. You don't have to get super specific as far as that goes. You'll get way more specific on measurement in the measurement section. But just like a brief sentence or 2 about, surveys will be given out in order to assess intelligence and personality. Boom, that's it. When you get into the measurement section, you can go into a lot more detail, but you don't necessarily have to do all that in the design section. This is just kind of an overview of what your research will look like for the design section. Then you're going to go into sampling and sampling methods. Again, this is future tense. This is research that you are proposing to do. So you have not done it yet. So I don't want you to make up data. I have at least one student every term that thinks that they have to make up data for this section and say there were 50 participants and 50% were male and 50% were female. No, you can't know that. You haven't done it yet. This is a proposal. I don't want you to make up stuff. So what you need to do is say what would be ideal, because again, this is showing that you've learned things from this class, right? That you've learned things about design, things that need to be there, things that are ideal, things that are beneficial, what good research looks like. So you need to say something like the ideal sample will include 250 male and female students from the Southeast region of the United States, or something like that. But it also includes demographics. So what ideal demographics would you have? You know, are you hoping to have 50% female, 50% male? Or you hope, or are you, but if you're saying you're going to survey from a certain, part of the United States, are most of them going to be from rural areas, or are most of them going to be white, or are most of them going to be from a different ethnic group? Things like that. You need to say that and say, if you think there's going to be issues with that, like, unfortunately, there will only be such and such, type of people in the study, which could be an ultimate limitation, but researchers will do their best to, get as varied a sample as possible, or something like that, and then, how are you going to sample them? So you need to be specific about what procedures you're going to do to sample them. How are you going to recruit them? How are you going to say, hey, be in my study? And then once that you say, hey, be in my study, how do they say, okay? And then once they say, okay, what happens then? Do they come back on campus into a room and you give them surveys? Are you emailing them surveys? Are you, if there's a treatment involved, are they coming into a clinical setting to be treated? Things like that. Like, what will the participants actually experience as they participate in your study? And then also a part of that is informed consent and debriefing. So, what informed consent will you use, and when will that occur in the process? And then what will the debriefing process look like at the end? And that goes into ethics as well. How are you going to protect the participants? What ways are you going to protect them from potential harm? And debriefing is part of that, making sure that when they leave the study that they are in the same mental state that they were when they came in. And then you'll go into the measurement section, and you will again describe how you're measuring your variables. Are you doing interview questions? Are you doing and where is that occurring? Are you going to do surveys? Are you going to take blood pressure? Are you going to have them pee in a cup? Are you going to whatever it is? What are they doing? How are you measuring? How are you getting that data? I need to know what the variables are. This variable is going to be measured by using this tool. This variable is going to be measured with this tool. Be very specific. And then, if you are hopefully you're using existing instruments, tools that have been previously validated as reliable and valid, because that's ideal. If so, say that. You need to cite your source where you got that tool from, and if you say you need to talk about the reliability and validity of it, and where that information came from. So you need to have citations for where that reliability and validity information came from. And then also just kind of describing the tool, how many items are on there, how it's scored, what the scores mean, who it was developed for, that kind of thing. And again, that can be just a few brief sentences, but you need to explain the tool a little bit, again, assuming that the person that's reading this isn't familiar with the tool. And again, that's for each variable, however you're measuring all your variables. If you are putting them into groups, that is part of this too. I know that's not really measuring, but that's part of that too, because how are you defining that variable? Where's the cutoff for this age group's going into here and this age group's going into here, and how does that look, or what does that look like? So that is something as well. However you're labeling your variables, measuring your variables, organizing your variables, however you want to look at it. And then make sure that you are using or that you are providing copies of those tools in the appendix at the end of your paper. That is part of the grading process as well. I need to see it. If you don't have a copy of it, there's tools on the internet you can screenshot just like a copy of the tool. That is sufficient. If it's something you're creating yourself, you need to provide that obviously for sure. And you also need to explain why you think that measuring that way is a reliable and valid way to do that. Because obviously if you're coming up with it yourself, it hasn't been previously established as reliable and valid. Okay, I think that's it. So that's it for your methodology section. If you have any questions about any of that, as you guys know, reach out to me. I'm here. I think that's it for week 6. And so I will see you guys next week. Bye. Okay, guys, I wanted to show you guys what you should be able to see as far as the annotations go that I've been talking about, in case you're like, she keeps talking about this, I don't know what this is, or in case you think you're seeing feedback and it's just like the generic feedback that is given on the rubric and you didn't realize there was actually stuff over here, or you didn't know how to get to these bubbles. Now, this isn't the student view, this is my view, so I don't know exactly if yours looks, different than this. I just decided to do this really quickly from my view, but it shouldn't be that different. So if you see these little yellow bubbles when you click on your paper after it's been graded, that it corresponds to these. And if you're not sure which one goes to which, you can click on it and it will kind of bring it up, more prominently, or you can click on it and it will light up the bubble that goes with it darker. You see how that's darker than that one. And so that kind of helps you see what I'm talking about. And you can see, I can put them anywhere in the screen, on the page. And so you can just use that to help guide your feedback. If you can't see these, please email me and let me know, because you should be able to have feedback to apply to improve your paper before you turn in your final proposal project. And again, I won't mark things off if you miss points. I won't tell you. There's no reason that I would not tell you why you missed those points, because that doesn't help you learn if you don't know why you lost points. So there will always be feedback. Also, while I have this pulled up, I wanted to show you guys something really quickly. The originality report that some of you guys have seen and has stressed you out a little bit because it says like 100% and you're like, oh my goodness, I've plagiarized my paper or something like that. For the research proposal project, this will be really close to 100% a lot of the time because you're submitting parts of the same paper again. And so what you need to do is actually look and see, click on it and see what it's flagging. And if it's flagging all of the stuff from your previous paper. So like this example, it was flagging the stuff from the previous assignment, from the lit review. So all of that stuff that it was highlighted was from the lit review. And so if you are ever concerned about that, just click on that to see what it's highlighting. If it's highlighting things that you used, like pieces that you used from research articles, then that likely means you quoted it without citing it properly in quotation marks and citations, or you didn't change the words enough into your own wording to make it to where it wasn't flagging it as potential plagiarism. And then you should be able to see your rubric, obviously, as well, that says how many points you got for each section of that as well. So I just wanted to show you guys, wanted to show you guys what that looks like in case you have not seen that, or in case your version of Blackboard or is not working, or you're having issues with that. You should be able to see that. I want that to be able to help you guys before you turn in your final project. And again, so that you can learn from your mistakes on the other assignments too. This isn't just about the proposal project, obviously. So that's the annotations that I've been referencing. If you guys have any questions, let me know.